Shalom and welcome to another edition of Our Daily Bread, where we discuss the weekly Torah portion. And this week's Parashat is the fourth Parashat of the book of Shemot, also called Exodus, and it's called Beshelach, which means when he sent. In this week's Parashat, we start off with the story where Yisra'el had left Mitzrayim, Egypt, and they're going to come up to the sea, and then Paro's going to chase after them. And we're going to go through all that. And then they're going to get on the other side. And we're going to see that Israel starts to complain about some things. And then we end up the half Torah with the story of Deborah and her going and fighting and taking the glory where many of the men of Israel wouldn't go and fight. So my message for 2011-12 is called The Enemies of Yisra'el. And my message this year is going to cover 5 main points: running from the battle, who is your enemy, external and internal, arms of Moshe, what we do matters, and Devorah, the shame of not fighting among you. Those are the bullet points. And basically, my message really digs into the concept of the enemies of Israel and the fact that many times, you know, I see a lot on the Messianic boards and sites. We see all the people, you know, oh, what's happening in the Gaza Strip? Oh, they're doing this treaty. Oh, this and that. It almost becomes this super fascination of what's going on with physical land of Israel over there. And not that that doesn't have its place. But it's so funny to me, and sad, really, that most people worry more about, you know, the Palestinians or this or that, the current news affairs. And I rarely see talk about, oh, we should really be keeping the Torah, you know. We're not supposed to bear false witness. You know, how many of us are lie about things? How many of us say we're going to do one thing and do another? Say, oh, I'll be there at noon, and then we're there at 12:30 or 12:05, and we say, oh, that doesn't matter. But yet the reality is that keeping your word absolutely matters. That's one of the foundations of your faith in God, is that you believe in his words. So we're supposed to be like him. Truth is not saying one thing and doing another. It's saying one thing and then that comes true. So that's just one simple example where you don't, but it's not fascinating to people. See, keeping the commandments isn't fascinating. It's not exciting. What's going on between this group and that group, and what, you know, what prophecy is about to happen, or this and that. You know, those always get all the people talking about them. But it's almost as if the Torah itself is not good enough, not exciting enough, that people are so focused on everybody else, they're not focused on them. They're focused on how everybody else is wrong, but not them. And that creates a real problem, a foundational problem with a relationship with God and his Torah, because the Torah is really about you. It's about me. Even greater so than all the other things, right? I mean, look at Moshe. Here we have all this stuff, you know, about Israel and about let my people go and all this and that. And what really happened to him, right? What's one of the key turning points in his life was when he disobeyed a simple instruction from Yahuwah, when he said, speak to the rock, and he struck the rock. And because of that, he didn't get to go into the promised land. And ultimately, he was told to go up and die shortly, a little while after that. So that was a big turning point, is my point about that. And yet it wasn't all the fantastic things about the miracles that he did and the this and that. You know, people remember those things, and those have their place. But the fact is, what's really relevant for us is what we do and our choices. And that may not be exciting, and maybe there's no fantastic DVD or hot new email from Israel that is going to get us all excited about doing the basics that we need to be keeping the Torah. But that's really deserves at least as much, if not more, attention than all those other things. Because at the end of the day, knowing exactly when Mashiach's going to return or what the signs are, though they're important, really doesn't matter if what you're doing is wrong. You see, at the end of the day, Didn't matter if you knew in the future when he was going to return. You could go get hit by a bus tomorrow afternoon. And what's really going to matter is, and what you're being judged by according to the scriptures, is every deed. He's going to open up the book of life, judge every man according to their deeds. So the fact that you lied and the fact that you didn't, teach your children diligently, the fact that you, looked on a woman with lust, all these things, these are going to be much more relevant to you than understanding who the third rider of the apocalypse is, or what's happening in the Gaza Strip. So, I try and keep founded and keep it down to earth. So this goes into what this week's message is about. It's called the enemies of Yisra'el. And what we do is just look and see the obvious, see what everybody else misses, because most people miss the obvious. We start off with the concept of running from the battle. It says that Elohim didn't take Israel straight to the land of the Palestine, because if they saw war, they might return to Mitzrayim. So this starts with a huge point, which is, so YHWH isn't taking them directly to where their goal is, because it'll be too much for them. They'll be afraid and they'll return to Mitzrayim, instead of growing and being prepared for the battle. So it's interesting that the very first concept that we see here is that Israel's going to run from the battle because they're not prepared for the battle. See, everybody wants to know when the battle is, what the battle, right? Everyone's, let's go to the promised land, right? But the fact is, God knows that if he takes them right to the promised land and they see that there's actually something they have to do, that God isn't just moving everybody out and it's going to be an empty promised land for them to go in and reap these great rewards. Well, the fact is, we have our part. We have our responsibility. And very few people talk about that. People talk about, salvation, I'm under grace or I'm saved. Very few people want to talk about, I have to obey or I'm dead. I don't know that there's any salvation for the unrepentant, disobedient people. I don't know that. I know that is kind of alluded to by many people. But if you examine the text, I think you'll find out that they say, salvation isn't about keeping the Torah. That's just for blessings. Well, the simple question I ask is salvation a blessing or is it a cursing? Is death a blessing or a cursing? Is life a blessing or a cursing? Because the bottom line is it says that, I said before you, life and death, good and evil. He's talking about the commandments, the Torah. The Torah brings life, right? And disobedience to the Torah brings death. That's what's been established from the very beginning. That's what happened with Noah. He obeyed God and built the ark. And so it says he was saved and his family with him. And everybody else, they weren't obeying God and they were destroyed. Israel, another good example. People say, wait a minute, I'm a seed of Abraham. I'm this, I'm that. So what? So, just as all of Israel was saved by the blood of the Lamb, right? Because they obeyed. Because they put the blood on the doorpost and they took the lamb and set it aside. Had they not done that, I don't know that being a part of Israel or being one of the seed of Abraham mattered, because the angel of death still would go into your household. So the fact is so what? They were saved. They were saved, and they were saved from Paro. That happens in this week's Parashat. Then they were brought into the wilderness, and given the law, and anybody who didn't obey, the law given in the wilderness wasn't for extra blessings in the kingdom. They didn't have a clear, hey, we're going to be saved from death and we're going to go into the kingdom. And by the way, if we obey God's commandments that he's giving us, that'll be extra big mansions in the kingdom. It didn't work like that. The fact is, if you didn't obey, you were killed by God in the wilderness and you would not see the promised land. And it's interesting that Mashiach says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, you shall in no way enter into the kingdom. Well, that brings up 2 points. Number one, it brings up that righteousness is one of the measurements for getting into the kingdom. That's going to ruffle feathers. People don't want to believe that. Sorry, Mashiach said, in no way will you enter into the kingdom if your righteousness doesn't exceed that of the Pharisees. Not only did it say that righteousness is a factor and that it's going to be measured, but that there's different levels of righteousness. There's not just you're this or that, so you can say you believe in him, so therefore you're right. It doesn't work like that. There's a measure. You see, there's a lot of commandments given. And there's a lot of sins. And all that can be measured. People don't want to believe they're going to be measured. That's why they fall in love with the salvation doctrine. They fall in love with this concept of membership, just like the people who came to Mashiach in his day who said, we're the seed of Abraham. They thought that somehow membership got them in, that got them to bypass keeping God's law and obeying God. It doesn't. There's no membership that gets you past obeying God. It doesn't exist. If someone's talked you into it, it's a lie. The fact is that God's people are punished and destroyed for disobedience, and they're also blessed and given life for obedience. That's how it works. It's so simple a child could get. So we start off this parashat, and it talks about running from the battle. Because there's a part we have to do. If they go to war, if they bring them right to the promised land, they're going to see that there's giants. There's our responsibility. God doesn't just hand it over to us. We have a part. Okay? And so part of when we think about those enemies of Israel, the first big lie is that there isn't anything we have to do. God's going to completely do it all for us. We just say we follow God and he'll go fight for us. That's not entirely true. The fact is, in this parashat, he does fight for them, but he requires things from them. As a matter of fact, we get to this concept of running from the battle. As soon as they see Paro coming, right, they cry out that God's trying to kill them. Did you bring us out here to kill us? Moshe says, be still, right? They already obeyed and put the blood on the doorpost and they went out. Those were all commanded by God. Okay, now he's saying be still for a minute. He talks to God. God says, tell the people to move forward and then stretch out your rod, right? So the people are going to move forward. It's a silly little thing. What's that mean, move forward? Some people say that they had to jump into the water. I don't know that that's exactly what it says. It doesn't really say that. It could have said, have them walk into the water and then I'll do this. It didn't really say that. So we don't know if they just moved forward closer to the water. Or they could have gone into the water. We don't know this. But we do know that the scripture says that they were commanded to do something. And then Moshe was commanded to do something. And as the leader, if he wouldn't have obeyed, or if the people wouldn't have obeyed, then the miracle of the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, incorrectly translated the Red Sea, that miracle would likely have not happened if these people hadn't done their part. So we see leadership and the people, everyone has their responsibility. And so this no responsibility teaching among the Torah is ridiculous. It really is. It's just something that's left over from Christianity, and I see it in a lot of Messianics. It still has shadows all over their theologies. But this concept of running from the battle, and then the second concept is who's your enemy? See, the children of Israel thought YHWH was their enemy. He brought them out to kill them. YHWH is not your enemy. He may ask you to do difficult things. You may have to trust him. He may have brought you up against the sea and allowed Paro to come up there, right? And it says that he allows this so that he would have glory and honor. These things are going to be brought to him because he is going to let the children of Israel see that, number one, he fights for them. And number two, that Paro isn't greater than he is. See, they're just supposed to obey him. And God works out the rest. If you obey him, you see that pattern in the scripture. Then God protects you. It doesn't mean he never lets you go through difficult things, but he will bring you through them. And a lot of people have an idea that, they're going to have to go through anything difficult. And that's a mistake too. They don't think they're going to go through judgment. They think they got to pass. Skips past judgment. Oh, I say believe in Yeshua, so I guess I'm going to be, everything else is just a bonus. I don't think so. It never was in the scriptures, all the way through the stories of all these different righteous people spoken of, written of. God doesn't change. His patterns don't change. So you can see that he expects difficult things look at Abraham having to sacrifice his only son. And he expects difficult things of his people. But even though it may seem impossible, sending Moshe back to Mitzrayim to tell Paro to let the people go, right? That to Moshe must have seemed impossible. Like, how's he I'm just gonna walk in there and say, let him go, and all these people he's gonna be like, yeah, no problem, all you had to do was ask? No way. That would have seemed like an impossible task. The fact is, it's not impossible with God. So the thing we have to realize is, who's our enemy? See, I can tell you one thing right off the bat. The enemy is disobedience. Okay? Number two, you think that the enemies are always outside. They're always outside. But the fact was, what we see in this parasha is the enemies of Israel is Yisra'el. They're their greatest enemy. See, Paro, small thing. If they're obeying God, God will fight for them, protect them. Nobody's going to prevail against you if you're obeying God. The big problem in this parasha is Yisrael complaining and disobeying God. That's the big thing that killed them all through the wilderness. It wasn't the other armies. As long as they were obeying, miraculous victories against the enemies. It was when they were disobeying that the enemies were allowed to overcome them. And more importantly, it was when they were disobeying Moshe and God that God himself brought plagues upon them and killed them and wiped them out. See, you think it's all about the enemy outside there. There's an external enemy and there's an internal enemy. The dangerous one is the enemy within your own gates that you don't know about. And for most people, they don't know about them because it's their fault, because it's them. They're their own enemy. They're the one that caused them to sin. They listen to themselves when they say, oh, well, this probably doesn't matter. God probably doesn't care if I do this. It certainly couldn't mean this. God knows my heart. He'll love me. All these little lies that we tell ourselves. These are your enemies because they encourage you to disobey. See, the measuring stick's always been the same. Obedience or disobedience. It's always the same. Always. That's all there is. Okay? You can bring in every other thing you want, salvation, grace, all that. They are subtitles that fit into the bigger picture of obedience or disobedience to God. It's the only core foundation that's ever mattered. And it goes from the start of Genesis all the way to the end. It started with Adam and Havah disobeying. And that brings us all the way to the redemption, all the way in the end of Revelation and judgment of every man, it says, in the book of life, according to their deeds. And those deeds are going to be measured. Are they a measure of obedience to God or disobedience to God? Now, there's other factors, certainly. There's mercy and there's redemption, and all of those are directly tied to obedience and disobedience. Don't let anybody talk you out of that. There's tons of people who will do it. And there's tons of bad teachings and people who ignorantly believe those teachings for whatever reason. But you could hand that book to a child and they would tell you it's about good and bad. And what happened to the people who obeyed God? What happened to people who disobeyed God? That includes his people. Other nations didn't matter. The measuring stick was always about authority of God and obedience or disobedience to it. So we get to the concept where they come to Mara and they complain about the waters, right? Because inside they're wanting something, and so they're complaining again, right? They don't know who their enemy is. They think it's God's trying to kill them with thirst, they say. See, they're not even aware enough to realize that their enemy has always been, and the enemy of Paro was disobedience to God. Their enemy would be rebellion to God and disobedience to God. It's the one measuring stick we can all see. And obedience to God always brings miraculous things against all odds. It changes bitter water into sweet water. Right? You're in the wilderness and you're thirsty. Hey, I don't care how bitter it is. Okay? You're either going to die or you're going to drink it. The fact that God can make it sweet, that's a miracle. The fact that God can take you, a huge group of people like that, it says 600,000 men. That's not including women and children and all that. So you're probably well over 1 million, could be 2 million. People had big families, could be 6 million. We don't know. The fact is that even if you have 1 million people out in the wilderness, right? There's no Safeway. There's no Walmart. There's no food store anywhere. There's no crops that have been planted that are ready to go. If you have livestock, that livestock will end up getting eaten. Okay, that ain't going to last for years. Okay, so you're in a wilderness, and the fact that bread will just show up on the ground in the morning, that's miraculous. Because you obeyed God. You put the blood on your doorpost, you obeyed him, you came out, and he's going to take you through step, and you got to believe. And he'll take care of the things that matter. He'll preserve you. Our problem isn't preservation. God's not going to, we have no record of God starving his people to death who are obeying him. It doesn't happen like that. But what we do have a record of is great famines and great plagues and things coming on people because they would disobey. So forget about the common things, the needs. You don't have to worry about the common needs. What you have to worry about, again, is focus on the right thing. It's about your obedience to God. So this takes us to this concept of the arms of Moshe, right? We get the story of the war with Amalek. And we see that when Moshe's arms were raised up, they prevailed, and when they weren't, they didn't. And so here you had two guys who actually held up his arms through the whole battle because they needed that. See, this was Moshe's part. That was the shoulders, and the scriptures are a model of the burden that they bear up, right? Because you use them to hold things up, and burdens are laid across your shoulders. And so this concept of raising up, right? This is to bear this burden. Well, it's upon this burden, which was the Torah, right? Obedience to the Torah is the burden. And if you will hold it up, you will prevail. And if you don't, you won't. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And see, even when, right, we have our brothers and other people who can help us hold up our arms so we can prevail in Torah, because it's difficult. It's about fellowship. The enemies of Yisra'el are not the ones who are trying but don't got it right. Right? Those aren't the enemies. Number one, our number one enemy is ourselves. Because we have access to a Torah. Whether we obey it or we don't is completely up to us, aside from all other things. Doesn't matter if there's famine in the land, if the fourth rider of the apocalypse shows up. None of that stuff matters. At the end of the day, it doesn't change whether we can obey God or not. That's on us entirely. That's the battle that we have to go in to claim that promised land. But see, most people, if they realized it was about them, just like in the beginning, if they took them to the land of the Pelishtim, right? And they saw those giant sins that are within ourselves, we'd say we can't do it. We wouldn't believe. We'd run back to wickedness and sin because we won't address our own sin. Okay? Our sin are like those giants that were in the land of the Pelishtim, in the promised land. So what we see is sometimes, right, we have to realize who our enemies are. And we have to help each other. Because the friends that hold up your arms are the ones who recognize and support you in your growth. Who don't let you get too carried away. Like today I posted something on all the chatter about this, I think his name's Eddie Long or something like that. This guy this other Messianic, this famous Christian guy, who's some Messianic guy came and crowned with the Torah or something. Everybody was so upset. And I posted on my wall, and then people started just getting all bent out of shape. And it's like I said, why are people getting so bent out of shape about this? Why are people so quick to criticize this guy? It could be a scam. I'm not saying he's a great guy or the Messianic guy was a great guy or I believe what they say. But you know what? The fact that they're having a conversation about Torah, that they're saying that Torah should be the authority in our lives, right? Doesn't matter who says that. You say that, a leader says that to 10,000 people. Now, does it mean that everyone will do it right and everyone will get it right, or that it won't, be manipulated and misused? Yeah. But everything's being manipulated and misused already. So that's not a change. That's not something where it's just easy to look at it when it's out there and say, oh, wait, this guy, but they're going to come in and they're not going to believe in the holy days. They're going to keep all of them but the holy days. They're going to keep the Sabbath, but not the holy days. So what? Let them keep the Sabbath. That's better than 5 minutes ago when they were not keeping the Sabbath or the holy days. Right? We're all working on it. We're all growing. We're all learning. Okay? The Word of God's already being blasphemed. The Word of God's already not being done all throughout, all by religious people. Doesn't matter if they're Christian, Messianic, or Jews. Okay? Stop worrying about that. That's a foolish worry. Right? Instead, worry about how you yourself are blaspheming and bringing and degrading the Word of God. Right? You drop something like this in a room, and 200 people come out of the work. Oh, yeah, he's wicked. Oh, he's crazy. Oh, that was horrible. Oh, I hope that gets shut down. Blah, 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 blah. Right? You make one mention of somebody else, what they're doing, and all the snakes come out and start biting and hissing. But what I don't see is anybody just randomly saying, oh, I had a bad thought. I shouldn't have that. Hey, oh, I broke my word. I can't believe that. Do you guys, can you believe that I broke my word and I lied? I said I was going to do something and I didn't. I mean, come on, guys, join in with me. We've got to get this guy out of here. I'm horrible. You need to denounce me right now. You know, organizations need to get rid. Any organization I'm in should denounce me right. You don't see people doing that for themselves when they do something that's against the Torah, that doesn't bring honor to God. Yet they'll do it about everybody else. See, to me, just logically, that doesn't make sense. It's not just judgment. It's not equal weights and measures, right? It's having a different weight for your sin than you have for everybody else's. So your sin, it's super light. It's hardly there. But everybody else's sin is grievous. They should be denounced. They should be cast out. We should ridicule them. We should do all kinds of things against them. Let's join together and create a group and get them out. They shouldn't be able to teach anybody. But those same people turn around and go teach their theories to other people that may not be right. And they don't say they should denounce, people should denounce them. So, we're all guilty of this. We all have flaw. It's when you don't see your own flaw very good because you're looking out, but you see everybody else's flaw in front of you. You know, you need to keep a little mirror right there that's reflecting right back to you. So as you're looking at somebody else and going, oh, look at that guy, I can't believe what he's doing, that you see, and you go, oh, hey, look at that guy, look at me, I can't believe the things I'm doing. Right? People don't want to hear that message. Again, it's not the fourth rider of the apocalypse realizing that we're sinful even though we think we're fine and everybody else is wrong. Nobody wants to hear messages like that. And that's how things usually are with the truth. They don't want to hear it. They want to hear something else. Something that pats them on the back, gives them a carrot, and lets them be haughty about everybody else who's not earning carrots. This is the problem. This is the internal enemy. It's the one we need to recognize. And when we do that, we should be humbled before we look at everybody else. Right? If Israel would have just squared themselves up, if they wouldn't complain, right? You think they're looking around, oh, look at these pagan nations, oh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, look at you, Israel. Look at you, who complained and said that your God, who just saved you multiple times, is trying to kill you. Oh, look at you, Yisra'el, who complained about water, who didn't trust in God to give you water or to give you food. Even after miracles happened, you continued to complain again and again and again, even after he already proved that he was going to take care of you. You know, look at you, Yisrael, who turned on Moshe and blamed him. And Moshe represents the Torah. So how many people just don't agree with the Torah, just blame the Torah subtly? Right? How many? I've heard so many Messianics say, no one can be perfect. No one can keep all the law. Really? I disagree. I don't think God, one of the laws of the Bible says that you shouldn't frustrate your children. Do you think he would give something to his children that they couldn't do? That's called frustrating your children. Don't you think that when he says, be perfect, you know, I am holy, be you holy, I am perfect, be you holy, be you perfect, did that not count? The fact is of course we can be perfect, and that's our goal. As Mashiach said, who was perfect, not only that he was the example, but he said, I would that you were one with me as I am one with the Father. He's one with the Father because he's perfect according to his will, according to his Torah. And he wants us to be perfect according to his will and according to the Torah too. Doesn't mean you're going to get it tomorrow. But see, that's where people can't believe it. People don't believe it because they've been so used to giving themselves the pat on the back that they're special to God. They're the seed of Abraham. They're Messianic. They believe in Yeshua. So what? Then you go and disobey. It's because you claim, well, I've already got my salvation. I'm already going to get big blessings in heaven. I'm going to the kingdom. It's just everybody else who's not right and who's not going to get to go. And I got to go tell them what's wrong with them. See, that's a problem with mankind. That's not Christian, Jewish, or religious thing. That's a problem with mankind. We refuse to look at ourselves. We justify our own wicked deeds. And we want to point the fingers and condemn and go after everybody else. See, that is the problem with Yisrael. It's blindness. See, we're all blind. We're blind because we don't see ourselves. When we just stand, we see everybody else around us. We don't see ourselves. The Torah is really the mirror. It's the most important mirror there is. Because it lets us see how naked and rebellious and wicked and wretched we are. So we can work on fixing that. If we walk around thinking we're awesome, and we just look at everybody else and see how bad they are, that's a real problem. And that's what I see in religion. So this brings us to our fifth point, which is Devorah. We have in the Haftorah the message of Devorah, and she goes out and fights. And she says, this is going to be, if I go out and fight, this is not going to be your honor. This is going to be my honor. And look at all the people who didn't, at the end, you get this kind of, they read out some of the people who had all these people. Where were you? Why didn't you come out and fight for God? See, this is the same way. It's the shame for not fighting among Israel. It wasn't about whether God could bring a victory or not. It was, yes, God's going to bring a victory. But shame on you who didn't come out and fight. You should have fought the battle. See, that battle is the same battle that we have with ourselves. It's not about whether someone else is going to be righteous or whether you can point the finger at everybody else who's wicked. They may change and become righteous. But the person you never pointed the finger at was yourself. And for that reason, there's a shame upon you. You may have been right that other person was wicked, but it's a shame on you that you never pointed the finger at yourself and recognized your own wickedness. That's the shame. You just sat there and did nothing about yourself. You tried to be everybody else's judge and guide and criticizer and I'm going to call out the false teachers. Well, call out your own false teachings if you're wise enough. Most people can't see them. That should be the first indication. I can't see any flaws in myself. A, I'm not flawed and I'm perfect. B, I'm blind and I didn't know it. Well, what did he say to the Pharisees? When they said, are we blind? He said, if you knew you were blind, then you could be healed. But because you say you see, that's why your sin remains with you. Because people say they're in need of nothing. So the real enemies of Israel are themselves. They were the number one problem they faced was themselves. It wasn't outside enemies. God always took care of those and always has. Those are the great miracles and things we learn of in the Torah. The thing that God doesn't do is he doesn't take care of what you're responsible for, which is yourself, right? He always gives you his part and he does his part, right? The angel of death came and allowed Israel to go, but your part was putting the blood of the lamb on your doorposts, or you'd have been fallen to the same judgment as the wickedest person among Mitzrayim. Doesn't matter. He's not a respecter of persons. He is a respecter of obedience. That I could say about YHWH. You see, the fact is that was Israel's problem. Israel's problem going out in the wilderness, God takes care of Paro, chariot's gone, never have to worry about them. Oh, yay, sing the song of Moshe. All right, we're here. Then right away, oh, hey. They're complaining about Moshe, they're complaining about God, they're complaining about all this and that, and they're sinning. And it's their sin that will bring plagues and punishment to them, as we learn as we go forward into the book of Shemot. Not the other nations. So let this sink in. Stop pointing the finger at other people and start pointing the finger at yourself. That's a wise man can do that. A wise man or woman focuses 90% of their time. Hey, just be equal. Point it at yourself equally as much as you point. That would be a hard thing for most people to figure out. So if you criticize somebody today, have you criticized yourself on something today? Okay? That should be your limit. You can no more judge another person, right? Unless you equally judge yourself. So if you want to make two judgment calls, hey, I'm not saying don't have judgment. I'm not saying anything goes. That's far from the truth. You should be able to look and go, hey, that's not right. Right? Homosexuality is not right. They say they're following the Torah, but they think that that's okay. I don't think it's okay. But if I looked at someone else and said, hey, that's not all right, right? Because people go, oh, that's an abomination. You know what else is an abomination? Eating pork. And yet I still see Messianics who go down to Pizza Hut or a pizza place or whatever, right? And they say, well, I'm just going to take the cheese pizza. Meanwhile, all that grease, right, all those hands and dishes that touched the dead pig, right, those same hands are the same ones, the guy who just put the pepperoni on their pizza now grabs your scoop of cheese with those same grease pepperoni hands that have pork grease all over them and spread your cheese around, and it sits in that oven that has pork grease all over the insides that is dripping down on your cheese pizza, and you walk away thinking, I just ordered a cheese pizza. You like that smell? You like to go into that pizza place? Or something that's called an abomination is being cooked on all those same pans and in all those same hands and the same knife that cuts your pizza? Right? I worked in a pizza place a long time ago when I was younger. I can tell you right now, that same cut knife, they call it, that just cut a pepperoni pizza, is cut right across all that same grease splatter across your cheese pizza that you're eating. So trust me, you can't order anything in one of those places unless it's prepackaged that is going to be kosher. It's unkosher. So you may sit there in the booth saying, homosexuality is an abomination. But while you eat that pig, that thing that's contaminated, that's just as much an abomination. So, right, it's just about being equal. But see, you give one judgment to other things, and you give yourself a bribe judgment, right? It comes from the root of coveting, which is to alter your judgment for gain. And if you do a biblical study on the word coveting, you're going to see it's a little bit different than what people perceive it is. But the fact is altering your judgment for a bribe, right? It's one of the worst things that you can do because there's some gain in it for you. And we do that with ourselves. We alter our judgment for ourselves. Sure, oh, we're justified. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, this is okay. But look at everybody else. Though it's so wicked, I can't believe it. Don't worry about other people. Mashiach clearly says that. Take the beam, right? Take the big cheese pizza with pork drippings all over it out of your own eye before you worry about what someone else is doing. And people just don't do that. They're great at looking for specks in their brother's eyes. Yeah, that's a problem. So, these are the enemies of Yisra'el. I'm sure it'll bug some people, and I hope I provoke them to reconsider and look at themselves. They may walk away with the breath going, oh, I don't believe what that guy says. That guy's a false prophet. Hey, he's not speaking right. Go away, mad. That's fine. But let that little bit of anger force you to question and prove me wrong. Prove to me that Israel isn't the problem with Israel more than any other nation. Okay? Because you can change that. You can't change the nations and the things that are going to happen around you. All that you can change is your obedience to God. That's what you're in charge of. That's what He gave you authority over. This is your land, right? Made from the dust, right? The land that God formed you with, the dust of the earth. That's your land. You get to rule over this. This head right here gets to rule over this land. Okay? Make sure you're not defiling your land. Make sure you're casting out the giant demons and wickedness out of your own land so that it can flourish before you worry about going to war against somebody else. So until next week, I'm going to say shalom.